Hey everybody. Yeah, that's recording. Again, jealous. You're all out having fun somewhere. Just so I can show you that's what the literary elements handout looks like. And see, it has like plot, setting, definitions, characters. Right? It kind of goes through all 9 of the things that we're going to be working with this week, and then in the module, and you can either print these out or you can use line paper and just write the elements, but you can see it'll say like after reading blah blah blah, right? Please think of how understanding these elements, right? So plot, you would write the plot, setting, things in the setting for the particular story, right? And then that's the other one. So today's video, we're going to be exploring literary elements, which when examined, I think they're actually pretty interesting, and they don't just work for literature. You can use them for film, television shows, plays, musicals, pretty much anything that has a narrative. You could theoretically, I don't know, use them to understand a person, right? So, what are literary elements? Um, I think the best way to think about it is I think about elements in science, right? Right? What are elements in science? They're each more of 100 substances that cannot be chemically interconverted or broken down into simpler substances. Each element is distinguished by its atomic number, i.e., the number of protons and electrons, right? And they were formerly believed to compose the physical universe. Why formerly? I have no idea, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So, in some way, we think of scientific elements as building blocks of the physical universe. So, literature, we can think of literary elements as the building blocks for a piece of literature, right? So, what happens when you put a bunch of elements together? I don't know. Maybe you get a new Hot Pocket, maybe you get a new Drake song. Literary elements are pretty similar in that they are naturally occurring. Well, they're not natural, but for the sake of not ruining my metaphor, let's just say they are. They're pure pieces that make up a story or a piece of literature, right? The literary elements, when put together into a compound, we'll call that compound a book. They create a piece of literature, right? Do you need all the elements to create a narrative or a story? No. But most stories do contain the key elements that we're going to talk about. Do you need all the elements to create a new Hot Pocket or Drake song? I have no idea, right? So, um, yeah. So, other than doing us getting to do a lot of reading, I really think that literary elements are one of the single most important things in this critical thinking class, right? And this is cool. You can use elements not only to deconstruct and single things out, which can help you analyze and sound all smarty pants, or if you write like me, you can use these elements to better create more effective stories, right? Another way we can think about literary elements is by thinking about acquaintances and friends. A real friend is someone who you know on a deeper level. Understanding how literary elements work can be like getting to know a friend on a deeper level, right? So, right, literary elements are ways that we get to know our literature better. They can be applied to, again, to fiction, nonfiction, creative nonfiction, playwriting, poetry, and so on and so forth. Um, yeah. The good news is that we've already been reading long enough to probably know a lot of this stuff just on our own. We just don't necessarily have all the words for it yet. So, but that's what we're going to do today. Literary elements and the red convertible. So, please take out your partially filled out literary element sheets. I was going to say I'll give you a second, but you can always just pause it. So, um, yeah, literary elements refer to devices and structures that authors use in narrative, storytelling, and things like character development. As readers, they give us a set of specific things to understand and help analyze literature. How specific? Very specific. Although very specific is a very non-specific word. So um, I'm going to just say specific, right? So this isn't an absolute list, but for me, these are the ones I commonly use the most, and they include plot, setting, character, point of view, imagery, symbolism, tone, themes, and style, right? So these elements shape the overall story. For example, a well developed character can evoke empathy and emotional connection, while symbolism can add kind of depth and layers of meaning. Literary elements often work to create a full and impactful literary work, like a Drake song. Um, and to be honest, I don't know any lyrics to any Drake songs except for the one that's like, I know when the highlight bling, that can only bling ring one thing. Can't even remember that. So, if you pick out these pieces of elements and you examine them, you can have a deeper understanding of a narrative. And or you could separate one. You could make an effective essay just on one of the elements, like characters or symbolism, right? Certainly, these elements point readers towards understanding work on a deeper level. So, you read the Red Convertible, you started your own literary elements assignment. You might be feeling a bit unsure right now about what you filled in. So, I'm going to kind of walk you through and show you the elements point by point, understand what is beneath the surface of the story. Hopefully, you pull up a blank literary elements form or the one that you're working on and you follow in and you just kind of fill it in as we're talking about it. So, I'm not going to read everything that's on each of these, but so know that you have your own definitions in the module and you can refer to those. But plot, right? Plot is what happens in a story. Events and thoughts which make up the story's basic structure. Almost all plots contain a conflict. It might be internal, person versus self, external, person versus person, person versus nature, person versus society, person versus technology, person versus fate, and so on and so forth, right? So it's what moves the story forward, right? What thoughts, what behaviors, what actions of characters move the plot forward, right? And sometimes I kind of think of plot as a friend telling me, and then this happened, and then we broke up, and then he cheated, and then we drove to Canada, and then we met Drake, and then Drake gave us a new type of Hot Pocket, right? So part of plot is what happens next and next. Obviously, plot is usually driven by conflict and various factors, but this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, right? So, Red Convertible, the plot is in chronological order, right? It traces, or you could say plots, the relationship between two brothers, Lyman and Henry, kind of from their joyous experiences with the Red Convertible to challenges they face after Henry's return from the war, right? The plot's conflicts revolve around the emotional distance between the brothers and kind of their attempts to reconnect, right? And in the end, Henry drowns, right? They get the car, they travel, they have a good time. Henry goes to war. Henry comes back with PTSD. They travel some more. Ultimately, Henry drowns, right, in the river, right? So it's plot for that. Setting, right? Setting refers to the location of a story in terms of place, time, social environment, and physical environment, right? Things like where does the story take place, right? Are the characters set in a certain sociological or social environment? Does the setting give them freedom, satisfaction, enjoyment, or does their environment make them feel trapped, dissatisfied, or unhappy, right? And the primary, right, for the Red Convertible, right, the primary setting, or at least kind of where it starts, rural area, I think around North Dakota, right, reflecting on the brothers' indigenous American heritage and providing insights. The setting provides insights into their cultural background and connections, right? The setting also adds a depth and context to the narrative. Having a setting it's on something like a reservation certainly means something. And it even in this story gives kind of a backdrop, even to things like available resources, right? So, right, where's the Red Convertible set? Yeah, are they set in a certain social environment? Are they located in a particular society or particular social class? Do they have money? Right? So, yeah, I think that can kind of cover that. Yeah. So, in terms of one thing for setting, too, right? If you think of indigenous Americans, they always had kind of healthy and trusting relationships with European settlers and European kind of ancestral Americans, right? With government run institutions, right? So, right, even in that setting, when Henry needs help, um, you would maybe think, well, why are they going to trust the government or these kind of other institutions, right? Uh, that have proved time and time again to kind of take advantage or do really harmful things, right? Like it's insane, but as late as 1970, doctors in the U.S. sterilized, I think, between 25 and maybe about 40% of indigenous women who were of childbearing age, right? And some of them as young as 15, right? So think of that for the moment, right? The initially set on a reservation in the 1970s, right? So how would that environment dictate or influence characters or their decisions, right? If you're Henry or his family, why might not you trust a psychiatrist, right? And do you even have the money, even if you did trust him? Um, so, right, if the setting was in New York with like a wealthy family, right, who felt like they could trust institutions, how would the effects and treatment of PTSD possibly make the story different, right? So we don't know those answers necessarily, but we can kind of use things like setting to at least make educated guesses or push out kind of assertions that we can partially at least back up through text. Characters, right? Characters, they're the people or the animals or even the animation, right? It could be an animated Hot Pocket. Uh, the term character refers to people's outward or animals' outward appearance and behavior, as well as their inner emotional, intellectual, and moral qualities, right? Most stories have a main character, the protagonist, whose personality traits move the plot forward and contribute to the conflict, right? So, who's the main character or the main characters in the story? Certainly Henry and Lyman. What is their situation? Uh, what do they do for a living, right? What are some of their characteristics or personality traits, right? Do those do the characters change throughout the story, right? And are they evolving characters? Certainly Henry evolves, right? Do they become different? Is the change large or small? Uh, yeah. So, yeah, when you're looking into fill the blanks, even getting something like 2 to 4 sentences, that's great, right? Maybe even 2 or 3 sentences, right? So in this story, the main characters, Lyman, Henry, they're pretty realistically characterized, right? Through their travels, dialogues, interactions. We learn about their bonds as brothers and their struggles as brothers, right? For example, Lyman's narration and description reveal Henry's PTSD after returning from the war, right? Yeah, Lyman is also an evolving character, right? Because often PTSD doesn't just affect, right, one person, right? But certainly Henry goes through a change. Yeah. So I think that's, right, a change brought on by war. Um, so point of view, right? POV is the acronym for that. Is the perspective from which a story is told. It's through the narrator's perspective, through the narrator's eyes and mind that the readers learn what's happening, right? So, what point of view does the story use, right? This definitely uses a first person point of view. Because I think right in the beginning of the story, doesn't he say something like, something, I'm Lyman, that's me, right? Somehow there's like a really clear indicator of that. Oh, yeah, I even wrote it down. He tells us, that's myself. So, right? And then we have to ask the questions about the narrator, right, in this story, right? Is Lyman, is he a reliable narrator or an unreliable narrator, right? So, an unreliable narrator is a character whose telling of the story is not completely accurate or credible due to problems with the character's mental state or maturity, right? So, there's a due clause in there. Does Lyman feel fairly solid and reliable to you, right? So, yeah, right? A reliable character or a reliable narrator doesn't need to be perfect, right? Your reliable friends are not perfect, um, right? Reliable narrators might have intentions that can be seen as good or bad, but their process isn't kind of unfit or like overtly narcissistic, right? So if you think of unreliable narrators, you could think of the narrator in Fight Club, the narrator in American Psycho. Why did that put a... Well, that's weird. It put like a bubble emoji. I wonder if you'll all be able to see that. That's weird. So, how could choosing an unreliable make it more interesting, right? So we know who the narrator is. We know that the narrator is generally that Lyman is reliable, right? Imagery, right? A literary device imagery consists of descriptive language. Now I want to see if I can make it do that again. Descriptive language that can function as a way for the reader to better imagine the world of the piece of literature, also adds symbolism to the work. So imagery draws on the all of our senses, right? It's not just our sense of sight, right? It's taste, touch, smell, sound, vision, right? So, what descriptive passages, phrases, or words stand out, right? And that becomes kind of a personal thing, right? So, whoever you are, you're going to gravitate towards probably different imagery, right? For me, there's this image of him wearing a field jacket. There's this image of how relaxed Henry is at the beginning with his arms thrown wide, right? And obviously I was affected, as probably most of you, by the ending and the imagery, and that really stood out. I felt like I could hear the river, I could kind of almost smell the trees, and I could see the action, right? So symbolism. A symbol is something that represents something else, right? It could be an event, a physical object, right? It could be non-physical, such as an idea or value. Authors use symbolism to convey meaning, right? So, what are some of the symbols in this story, right? One of the smaller ones, we have this picture that Bonita takes. My face is right out in the sun, big and round, but he might have drawn back because the shadows on his face are deep as holes. There are two shadows curved like little hooks around the ends of his smiles, right? So shadows can be a symbol, right? Kind of a symbol of the shadow side, the things we keep hidden, what we do in the shadows, even not feeling well. Conversely, Lyman is symbolized with the sun, right? And then, the biggest symbol in the story is the car itself, right? This kind of red, flashy car that represents the youthful, vibrant, and exciting relationship between Lyman and Henry before the war. The car is in mint condition. The brothers are happy. During the war, when Henry and Lyman are separated, the car is left alone. When Henry comes back from the war, Lyman tries to rekindle their friendship, but when his efforts fail, he damages the car and in turn symbolically damages the relationship, right? Henry wants to remain close with his brother, kind of restore his personality, so he kind of spends these countless hours repairing the car. When he does, they seem to they have a glimmer of hope. It's sort of reminisce about good times. And in the end, when Henry drowns and is lost forever, um, Lyman pushes the car into the river to sink with him, right? Representing that the connection that they once had is now kind of drowned or lost, right? So, yeah, Enright uses the relationship of Henry, Lyman, and the convertible to kind of express the effects of war, and on close relationships between soldiers and the people that they care about. So, tone in literature, tone is kind of the attitude. Tone is tone, right? Check your tone, right? Tone is the attitude or approach that the author takes towards the work's central theme or subject. Works of literature can have many different types of tones, such as humorous, solemn, distant, alienated, intimate, kind of all this. What they aren't usually is monotone, right? Tones usually change, right? Just like when you're talking to somebody, their tone will change throughout the course of a conversation or the course of a day. Tone and story changes as well. Monotone can be very boring. It might be interesting, but it could be very boring, right? So, so tone, you want to kind of pick out the dominant tone, right? Is it kind of casual? Is it formal? Is it harsh? Is it relaxed? Is it a warm tone, right? Is it a cold tone? So, and I would say that the tone kind of shifts. It ends. The dominant tone is like kind of solemn or kind of sad, right? But it definitely has these kind of peaks and valleys. Theme. What is the theme? The theme of this one, the effects of war on soldiers when they return home, right? So the theme of any story is the underlying message, the big idea. In other words, what critical belief about life is the author trying to convey through writing, right? And themes are usually, I don't want to say universal because not a lot of things are universal, but maybe close to universal, right? Themes are things like crime doesn't pay, own worst enemy, coming of age, overcoming the odds, love conquers all, right? It's what lesson or message does the author want the reader to understand and why. And last but not least, we have style, right? Style in literature is the literary element that describes the ways in which the author uses words, the author's word choice, sentence structure, figurative language, right? So one way we can understand literary style is to think about fashion style, right? Clothes can be informal or casual or preppy or athletic and so on and so forth, right? Literary style is just like if the piece of literature put on words for clothes. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense. But I'll give you an example, right? So we can dress a single message in several different ways, right? Take, for instance, he's dead. He's passed away. He's sleeping with the fishes. He's gone to meet his maker. He's kicked the bucket, right? So the version of the sentence that the writer chooses can tell a lot about the situation and the speaker, right? And depending on what is being written, it can tell us something about the writer. So, right, for example, notice how style shifts depending on this word choice. The girls are at the movies. The women are at the movies. The gals are at the movies. The ladies are at the movies. The dames are at the movies. The females are at the movies, right? The writer and the above are your options. Let's say if you want to portray a character that's grounded and normal, which would you go for? You might go for the women are at the movies, right? If the character is a gangster from the 1930s, you might say the dames are at the movies, right? If you wanted to show a character who was maybe a little more disconnected, you might have the character say the females are at the movie, right? So really, as far as style, again, you kind of get to this like, I get to like, that's too long, right? Yeah, when you get to style, you kind of just pick out, try and think of the type of style it is, right? And in this case, it's fairly casual. It's not that kind of academic or it's not trying to be. It's not pretentious. It's not trying to be, right? It's a pretty casual, middle of the road style, right? It's fairly realistic, um, grounded, casual style, right? I think that's how I would put it. So, um, right? And I think that that fits the characters. So, yeah, so hopefully you've been playing along, gotten this assignment knocked out. After this, you will see a separate assignment that one you get to do completely on your own, but it is a shorter story, um, quite a bit shorter. At least I think it's quite a bit shorter. And I intentionally picked one that I thought would be really reasonable to work with. So for filling out your own blank literary assignment from start to finish, and again, those guys. You could also use line paper and write imagery, and then just fill in your findings. So for that one, you'll read The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, and work to fill out a blank literary element sheet by hand. Right, I do want these to be handwritten. Then you'll take photos of it and submit it. Right, make sure to submit both literary element assignments. Just submit them in one attachment, or you're going to submit a series of pictures, right? The one we kind of did together and the one that you're doing on your own. And yeah, if you have any questions, please message me. This is one where I wish we got to be in class together because it's a fun conversation and it's easier to go over in person. So bye for now. Let me see if I can make it do. It won't do that emoji thing.